Thank you so much, Lance. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Jean, and I'm a co-founder of Linkurious. Linkurious provides an investigation platform which is trusted by thousands of analysts throughout the world to detect and investigate all sorts of criminal networks. Today, I'm going to walk you through a few slides and a demo to explain how to leverage graph analytics to fight back against cyber threats. In cybersecurity, context is critical. Imagine that, for example, you've been notified about an unusual connection between a computer within your company's network and an external server. In and of itself, is this important? Well, it totally depends on the context. For large organizations, for example, there can be thousands of such events each day. And the cybersecurity team can easily get buried in alerts and meaningless work by chasing this type of minor incident. What's critical to prioritize work or to make decisions is to understand the context around what is happening. So for example, here, maybe the external server is actually a command control server that has been associated to a known hacking group by existing cyber intelligence reports. If that's the case, then the incident should by all means trigger a very quick response. The problem is that cybersecurity teams tend to think in lists. As John Lambert from Microsoft puts it, most defenders focus on protecting their assets, prioritizing them, and sorting them by workload and business function. In practice, defenders are awashed in lists of assets, in system management services, in asset inventory databases, in BCDR spreadsheets. Of course, attackers are not thinking in terms of lists. What they are thinking in terms of is graph. Assets are connected to each other by security relationships. Attackers breach a network by landing somewhere in the graph using a technique such as spear phishing, and then they hack, finding vulnerable systems by navigating in the graph. Here we can see how compromising a user in domain 1 can lead to getting an admin account in domain 3. If, as a cybersecurity expert, you're thinking about the security of your network without deep knowledge of the graphs inside that network, then you are at a total disadvantage against the attackers. I want now to give you 5 concrete examples of the cybersecurity graph and how it can help you and your team. So first example, the attack paths. So graph analytics can reveal the hidden and often unintended relationships within an Active Directory environment. Attackers can then use graph analytics to easily identify highly complex attack paths that would otherwise be impossible to quickly identify. And defenders can use the same graph analytics approach to identify and eliminate those very same attack paths. So that's the first use case. A second use case is incident response. Graph analytics can help shorten the response cycle by allowing cyber analysts to quickly pivot around the devices, the systems, the users, the tickets surrounding a given incident. And then with rich context, they can assess the gravity of the incident and its spread. A third use case is digital forensics. With root cause analysis powered by advanced graph visualization, you can reveal what happened during an incident. You can identify the attack vectors, the vulnerabilities, the affected devices, and the scale of the damage. Another use case is threat detection. Graph analytics here can be used to detect complex patterns that span across multiple entities and relationships, and that would be missed by machine learning or traditional cybersecurity rules. And finally, cyber threat intelligence. The leading format for showing cyber intelligence today is TIX, and it adopts a graph approach. This graph approach is necessary to represent the complex relationships between tactics, techniques, groups, and software, and make this information actionable for cybersecurity teams. So there you have it, 5 concrete examples of how graph analytics and the graph approach can help cybersecurity teams. Neo4j helps store and analyze in real time graphs of billions of nodes and relationships. It's really the foundation for providing cybersecurity teams with a rich understanding of their contexts. Ultimately, this translates in faster investigations and the detection of new patterns. So that's really what the impact of graph is all about in the cybersecurity realm. At Linkurious, we are providing a tool called Linkurious Enterprise. It's an investigation platform that leverages Neo4j and graph analytics to uncover cyber threats and other criminal activities. It can be deployed on-premise or in the cloud. And with Linkurious Enterprise, analysts can explore in seconds the complex environment around any suspicious situation, no matter how complex, to make quick and data-driven decisions. So in this cybersecurity-related presentation, I've decided to illustrate the impact of graph analytics with a concrete case study. So for those of you who are not familiar with the example that I'm going to use, which revolves around Before Bank, it's a French digital bank. This bank is owned by Groupe Crédit Agricole, one of Europe's leading banks. And as a topic for a case study, it's quite interesting actually, because in some regards, it has the agility of a challenger bank, and at the same time, it has the resources of a much larger bank. Let's rewind time a little bit. A few years ago, when the Linkurious team first met Before Bank, that data was fairly siloed. Different business domains had led to different apps, different teams, and different databases. Totally not an unusual situation in the financial industry, of course. The problem with that is that the reality is oftentimes more complex than silos. A client in the retail bank database can be linked to an address mentioned in the dataset from a third-party data source, for example, and that same client can be linked to an IP address that shows up in the website and its database. And in a siloed world, it's very hard to connect those different dots to create a big picture of what's happening and the data related to the clients. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about phishing attacks. So for those of you who are not familiar with phishing attacks, a phishing attack starts when an attacker sends an email to a victim. That victim is then routed to a fake website. On that website, the victim enters his or her credentials, which are invested by the attacker, who can then use the credentials to access the real website in an effective manner. So why is fighting back against phishing attacks so complex? An attack could pop up on the radar of a compliance team as a new beneficiary in a bank account and with immediate withdrawals. So it could be one scenario. The same attack can pop up in the cybersecurity team's radar via new IP addresses accessing new existing accounts in an unusual fashion. In both cases, there's a need at some point to pivot from one domain to another. And it can be hard. It can be, this need to pivot. It can be to understand the financial connections behind some unusual connections, or it can be to understand the recent online connections behind a set of suspicious transactions. In the case of phishing attacks, Before Bank experimented all the issues associated with lateral thinking that we mentioned previously. So what does it mean in practice? Well, it means a couple of things, really. First, the fact that there's an ineffective identification of suspicious behaviors. with analytics which are focused on silo-specific information, the opportunity to detect anomalies is reduced. Secondly, it's harder to identify the spread of an attack. So when shifting from one data domain to another within the context of an investigation, it's complex and it limits the ability to map the full extent of the accomplices and the security issues related to the attack. And finally, there's a lot of wasted resources. The time of investigators is wasted on internal communications and on ad hoc data wrangling. So in a nutshell, silos can really quickly turn into cybersecurity blind spots. So to tackle this issue, B4 Bank identified the need to rethink the way the fraud and the cybersecurity teams understood the clients. And the goal was to move toward a 360-degree view of the client. What became quickly apparent for the analytics team at B4 Bank was that the best way to accomplish that was to start thinking about clients, not as isolated entities, but as part of a larger network where the clients can be connected to one another across transactions, emails, IP addresses, phone numbers, and more. Here you can see at a high level how the process of migrating to a legacy system to Linkurious Enterprise looks like. It all starts with data preparation, identifying the relevant data sources for the project. Then a graph expert imports the data into Neo4j. Then the analysts from the client work with the graph experts to customize the look and feel of Linkurious Enterprise and to set up alerts and create templates based on their requirements. And finally, the end users, the analysts, can connect to Linkurious Enterprise or access it via an existing app to detect and investigate cyber attacks. So Linkurious partnered with B4 Bank to accelerate their journey toward a 360-degree view of their clients. B4 Bank used Linkurious Enterprise, an investigation platform that leverages graph analytics to accelerate investigations and detect suspicious patterns other solutions cannot identify. In order to illustrate all of that, we have prepared a bit of a demo revolving around fake data that will give you a taste of the power of Linkurious Enterprise. So this is the Linkurious Enterprise UI. So today I'm going to play the part of a cyber analyst, and I've been notified that a new IP address has accessed 6 bank accounts in a short time span. Obviously, this is suspicious, and I want to investigate the situation to assess whether these bank accounts have been compromised somehow. So in order to do that, I need to look into the IP addresses and what they are connected to. We will explore a database containing dummy clients data, including people, addresses, emails, loans, phone numbers, IP addresses, and more. And we will see how Linkurious Enterprise makes it intuitive to explore this complex data to find relevant information. So we are going to type the name of the IP address that we are interested in. So it's right there, 50.199.11.238. So I'm tapping that. I can see a bunch of information showing up on the left panel with everything that I have about that one node. I can see that's my IP address. I can see the name and some extra information. I can minimize the panel to focus on what's going on here. And what pops up right now for me is the little 6 next to the node. So this indicates that that IP address in my system it's connected to 6 relationships. So I'm going to go ahead and double click and we retrieve everything that the IP address is connected to. So we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I think, clients that are all connected to that IP address. From here, I can drill further. I can select all of the clients and retrieve maybe only the addresses that they're connected to. I can do that. or I can retrieve everything that they are connected to. So I have a lot of granularity in terms of exploring the graph, but I can also call what we call a query template. This one is called indirect contacts, and trigger in a very seamless fashion a graph query behind the scene. And this one graph query gives me all the direct connections of the people that I was investigating. I'm just going to show you what it looks like behind the scene. So this is the query, and we see the code that is actually used in that query. Query templates are really a way to turn powerful graph queries into something that can be used seamlessly by non-graph experts. Going back now to the Linkurious Enterprise UI, I'm going to undo, and I'm just going to retrieve everything that those 6 persons are connected to. Okay, so I have new information on the screen, and there's already a few things that seem interesting to me. So first of all, indeed, those 6 persons are all sharing the same IP address. So that's fairly unusual. If I plot the data on a map, it becomes even more unusual in the sense that the different individuals are connected to addresses that are scattered throughout the world. So it's weird that they are somehow using the same IP address. Something else that's seem of interest to me is that this person, and this person are all tied to bank accounts, and all of those bank accounts are ultimately tied to this bank account. So there seems to be connections across the different clients, across an IP address and bank account. To get a feel for the situation and understand what's going on, I'm going to prune a little bit the visualization and remove some non-relevant stuff. So I'm going to open the filter panel here, and I'm going to remove the addresses, the IP addresses, the loans, keeping the persons, keeping the phone numbers, and I'm just going to keep the bank accounts, persons, to focus on sort of the financial part of the situation. I'm going to close that. So the situation is clear here, and I can see that this bank account, this bank account, this bank account, this bank account, and this bank account are all dumping money into that bank account out in the middle. Okay, so that that is definitely of interest to me, and I'm going to want to sort of follow the money and dive deeper into the situation. So in order to do that, I'm simply going to double click on that node, which brings up new information, bank accounts that are also connected to that bank account. I'm not necessarily interested into all of those bank accounts and transactions, so I'm going to focus on a specific time frame around the incident that I'm interested in, which occurred sometimes in August. So I'm going to change things a little bit and use this time slider to really narrow down my investigation to a particular time frame. So we were looking into that bank account, and we have identified that this bank account has transferred a bunch of money, actually, 50K around this date, to this other bank account. Okay, so that's interesting to me. I'm going, to keep on drilling into the data. So we are going to double click. So we had some new information. Some stuff are filtered out because they happen outside of the time range that we are interested in. And we land on this other bank account, and we see that we have one transaction, which is, pretty much the same amount. Yeah, actually the exact same amount as this one. And here we are sort of we are going to double click and go an extra step, and we see another big transaction around the same time frame for the same amount actually, and it leads us to this bank account. Except that this bank account here is ultimately connected to nothing. So there are some good news, bad news. So indeed, we do have a suspicious situation on our hands with an IP address addressing multiple bank accounts in a suspicious fashion, and then a set of transactions, a flow of money already, and that is emptying the compromised bank accounts and funneling the money into a series of bank accounts, into this bank account, and this other one, and finally this one. So we are at a bit of a dead end with that last step. But right now we actually have quite a bit of information that we can leverage. So I'm going to pause here. We can see how Linkurious Enterprise has been very helpful and easy to use to navigate the complex web of relationships, to identify both that there's something fishy going on and then to track the flow of money. At this point, I can use a number of options to communicate my findings. I can click here on export, and I can extract a spreadsheet version of the data that I've uncovered. I can also actually export my visualization as a PNG, so that can be used in a PowerPoint presentation or something of that nature. I can also save the visualization. Okay, so that I can go back to it in the future. That visualization that we have saved, we can share it with others. So here I can simply type the name of a person working in my team to give him or her access to what I've uncovered. So it's really a powerful way to work collaboratively on that type of investigation. So here we have seen how Linkurious Enterprise accelerates the investigation. So far, we have seen how to investigate an IP address who we know is suspicious. But what if we want to be more proactive and automatically surface the sort of suspicious connections among IP addresses or transactions that we just uncovered? So that's where Linkurious Enterprise provides an alert system that can help do that type of things. So I'm going to switch now to the dashboard of Linkurious Enterprise, where we see the different visualizations that we have stored, and I'm going to click on alerts. Here we see the different alerts that we have created, and I'm going to focus on this one. So it's a suspicious IPs alert, and I'm going to show you what it looks like behind the scenes before actually processing the alerts generated by that alert. So I'm going to go ahead and click on edit, and we see what is pouring this alert. So it's graph query written in Cypher. We are trying to identify IP addresses tied to persons, and basically we are interested in situations where we have a set of persons above 2. So when we have at least 3 persons showing the same IP address, we want to be notified. So it's a fairly simple and basic query to illustrate the point. So as a data scientist or graph expert, I can set up that query, and then Linkurious Enterprise is going to be automatically running the query and will notify me every time there's a new occurrence of the pattern described in the query that pops up in my data. I'm closing the query, and I'm going to show you what it looks like, not from the perspective of a developer or data scientist, sorry, but from the perspective of a cyber analyst. I'm simply clicking here on suspicious IPs. I can see a list of alerts. I can click on one of those alerts, and I can inspect it. So here I can see streamlined visualization with the relevant data points for the alert. I can make a quick judgment call based on what I'm seeing on the screen here, and either dismiss or confirm the alert. And if I have any doubt, if I want to dive deeper to make sure that I'm making the right decision here, I can open the full Linkurious Enterprise UI to investigate further the situation. Going back to the dashboard now. Okay. So we have seen how the Linkurious Enterprise system makes it easy to monitor your data and react quickly against suspicious behaviors. And together, we have explored during the demo how to manually navigate and investigate your graph data, as well as how to automatically detect suspicious patterns. Either way, we can surely see that the Linkurious Enterprise UI is intuitive and can be easily adopted by non-technical users. More importantly, Linkurious Enterprise enables analysts to eliminate blind spots and speed up the investigation process. So that's it for today's demo. Now I'm going back to my presentation. Okay. As of today, dozens of industry-leading organizations around the world trust Linkurious to successfully find insights hidden in connected data on a daily basis. These organizations range from government agencies to financial organizations. In particular, three of the 5 main US banking networks use Linkurious Enterprise to identify, explore, and neutralize complex fraud and money laundering networks. So that's it for today's presentation. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know.
Great. Thanks so much, Jean. It's such an excellent presentation. And I just really love all of the export options that there are. It's like, do you want Excel? Do you want a PNG? Do you just want to share it? I think that's great. So I want to remind the audience that they can submit questions using the questions tab located at the top of their screen. If we don't get to your question, someone from Neo4j will reach out to you directly, or you can send an email to webinar@neo4j.com. But there have been some questions that have come in, so we can get started with those. So this one came up, and it came up a couple different times. How does Linkurious Enterprise compare with Bloom?
Sure. So these are 2 graph visualization products, I would say. Linkurious Enterprise has been around for a little bit longer than Bloom, and we are focused on security-related investigations. And all clients notice that the product has more depth in terms of the features that enable untangling complex networks. And it's also easier to use collaboratively in terms of the API that helps integrate the system with other products, in terms of the collaboration, in terms of sharing and exporting visualizations. So that's these would be the big differences, I would say.
Great, thank you. And can Linkurious Enterprise be used by non-graph experts?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's really what the product is meant to do. Just to give you a concrete example, Linkurious Enterprise was used in the Panama Papers investigation. So it's the biggest data leak in history, with a network of 350 plus journalists throughout the world, all using Linkurious Enterprise to investigate the data about offshore banking. And these folks were not data gurus, not data experts, but they were really experts at very curious folks, I guess, experts at thinking like criminals, and passionate about investigating data. And Linkurious Enterprise, is like a superpower for those people. It's very easy and intuitive to use, and it lets them, dive into the data in a seamless fashion to find answers.
Oh, that's great, and what a great example to use as well. And it looks like we're getting tight on time, but we have time for one more question. So tell us, what's the best way to get started with the Linkurious Enterprise?
Sure. I can think of two ways right there. The first one is to drop an email at contact@linkurious.us. The other one is to visit the website. We do provide free trial versions of the product, and we'd be happy to give access to Linkurious Enterprise to any person or any organization that wants to try it out.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, Jean. We really appreciate you being here and sharing this with us. And for those in the audience, our last session will be starting in just a few minutes, so stay tuned for that. Thanks again, Jean.
Thank you so much.